So you mentioned one of your portfolio companies, Super, that you invested in with Jay-Z and some other folks. Skillshare is another company of yours that you've also invested in. It was a bet you made on a founder and the business that essentially educates aspiring creators to develop their skill sets. What was the motivation behind the decision to invest in that company?
Yeah. So Skillshare is one of our successes. They're doing great, and so we're very proud of that investment. I would say, why do we invest in that company? It's probably the same set of reasons that we invest in any company, and in fact,
Mm,
it's relatively. There's some things that we look for as a firm that are unique, but I think what would
mm,
be useful actually is to go through this sort of foundation that most investors look for, which also like
yeah.
it's probably the majority. It's definitely the overwhelming majority of our rubric as well in terms of like what we look for. But I also think if you think about it, it's probably what A&R reps, are looking for in artists, and labels are looking for in producers and things like that too. So, for us, we call it the three T's: team, TAM, and traction, right? So the first is the team. Um, and there are lots of like little sub things in the team, sort of like subcategories of, okay, what have they done before? And,
Mm,
um, how much of that is relevant? What skills can they bring? But actually more than that, even because, things are changing so fast, really, we look for a lot of psychological characteristics like grit and growth mindset. When
mm,
you are a founder, probably just like, by the way, I'd say like most producers, the way that I think about it, are kind of like founders, right? I mean, you're hustling, your product is your music, you're trying to find product market fit, you're trying to get distribution, promote it, get into people's hands, have a marketing strategy, all that stuff. So like, you're kind of like an entrepreneur in a sense, right? So, um, the if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to get punched in the face. Like I said before, there are going to be up moments, there are going to be down moments, right? And in those
yeah.
down moments, if it's your own creation and somebody says, nah, I don't want that, it's hard, man, right? It's like you
It
get
is.
the door slammed in your face, and to be able to come back from that and say, I'm going to stick with it despite all these difficult times, and to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it, that's really much harder to find than like whatever
Mm,
ABC skill set, right? You can learn skills, but these psychological things,
like,
that grit and growth mindset is
yeah.
harder to teach somebody. I think you can actually get it over time too, but it's harder.
Mm.
It
So
is.
so that's the team, part of it. TAM is what we call total addressable market, TAM. And so for venture capitalists, when we go and invest in companies, we invest in them pretty early. So it's pretty risky in a sense, right? But that
Mm-hmm.
means that when one works out, we have to see that it's could be a really, really big company, at least like $1 billion company. These days, it's like
Mm,
there's so many $1 billion companies. So unicorn isn't
yeah.
even that interesting. Like it's like, okay,
Mm.
it's got to be it could be a decacorn, right? For it to kind of be interesting. And so, how could it do that? You have to think about the business model and then the space that it's in. And it's the same thing. Like, you know, you could be the best, most amazing, most talented artist in Gregorian chant in the world, right? And
Yeah.
it's gonna be hard, man. It's gonna be hard to get your music out there because there just really ain't a market for that sort of thing. And does that
Mm-hmm.
mean you should sell out and go do what's commercial? Not necessarily, right? It depends on kind of what you care about.
Mm-hmm.
When I went into Larry Gold and the Roots studio, it was the first time I really was in an environment where it was like, a business, and it was straight up like, we're going to make records that sell, right? And
Hmm.
they
Yeah.
didn't. I don't think they were. Up until that point, I had this thing in my head of like, if you try and make records that sell, you're selling out, right? So the only
Mm,
true art is stuff that like only a niche audience can really enjoy and process.
Keeping it
Um,
mm,
underground.
yeah, and there's something to that perspective. I can understand that. But then after going and seeing Larry and the Roots, and Questlove was up in the studio and everything, and like, I mean, these guys, they're commercial, but they're talented, right? They're
They're
musical.
brilliant. Yeah, they're
They're
brilliant.
not. I don't feel like they're sacrificing on their art at all. So if you want to go that route, and these days, I think that I'm personally, I don't think it's the right thing or the wrong thing, but I'm personally much more open to this
Mm,
intersection of profit and purpose, right? And it's something that we do as a firm as well, because we have this like impact, like climate change thesis. But then, a lot of people are like, oh, you're investing in climate change, it's like a charity. It's like, no, 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 no. We're trying to make a lot of money too, right? Because
yeah.
actually, I think in the short term, you can sacrifice like impact to make money. You can go
Mm,
set up I don't know, like weapons dealing ring or something like that. I don't know, but in the
mm-hmm.
long term, I think that catches up with you, right? In the long term, I think you have to
For sure.
do impactful like things that are good for the world to make money in the
Mm,
long term. I also think that if you're not adding value and creating some value, like it's not that sustainable, right? There's certain things that are um, yeah. So if you set up a company and if it's profitable, then you can scale more, you can have more employees, you can have more customers, and that scales your impact that you're making as well,
mm,
right? So I like to
for
sit at the
sure.
intersection of profit and purpose in general. That's for me. It's not necessarily the right
Mm,
thing, but
Mm.
and then so again, when we invest, whether it's a company, or I think when A&R rep, and I know that these days like labels aren't necessarily the way to go, or it's not the only way to go certainly,
mm,
but just thinking through like getting out there, the total addressable markets, like is this product something where there's a big opportunity or not? I think that's worth just thinking about if
uh,
that's where you decide to go. And the last thing
Mm-hmm.
is traction. um,
mm,
and this is an interesting one because okay, so when I started my first company, the way that it would go was, a founder or CEO would have an idea. They'd be like, hey, I'm going to write a 30-page business plan, and then go bring that to venture capitalists, raise money, and then you go build for like a year. And then you have a
mm,
product, and you see, like, did the product fit the market or not? And usually it doesn't, it's not quite, so you have to iterate a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what's happened is that because of like cloud computing and because of, Amazon Web Services and all this stuff, you can actually like you can spend like nothing and go and build a company,
Mm-hmm.
if you know how to code,
that's
especially.
crazy.
And you can build something for 2 weeks and then get feedback on it from your 10 best friends and iterate on it, iterate on it, iterate on it. And so that same
Yeah.
shift from like having to go for a very long iteration cycle to very short
Mm,
has happened in the music industry as well, right? And so
Yeah.
it blew
yes.
my mind because I had
Yes.
been out of my band for I don't know, it was like 5 years. I
Mm,
was in Korea for 4 years, right? And we were working on some music, Elmo, like
Yeah.
K-pop stuff back then. But
mm,
you
Mm-hmm.
know, I hadn't been back in the U.S. and back in like really in the industry. But when I went back and I met my bandmates, who are by the way much more successful than me, like our drummers like playing stadiums, like selling out stadiums around. Our bassist went and he's toured with Radiohead and Beck and all these people. So they're like way more successful than me. But I went back and I was talking to one of the bandmates and like, dude, these days it's crazy. You can just go and onto like these listservs, like mailing list type, I don't know, chat group things where, and we'll find profiles of bands that we think are kind of similar to us, and then we'll sometimes they're like indie bands and sometimes we'll just write covers and then put them up there, and then we start to just gain a following, right? And you can do it in a much shorter iteration
wow.
cycle. You don't have to like go and spend 50 grand at a studio and then who knows how much more
Yeah,
promoting for your studio record to see if it fits the market or not. You can just get that
Yeah.
traction
for
early.
sure.
And so that blew my mind, and it's like it actually makes a lot of sense. So all of
Yeah.
you out there who are making music, you're doing it in the best time in the history of the universe, right? It's like you can
Absolutely.
actually you're not held hostage by these huge players. You can go out and hustle and do
For
your thing and
sure.
start to get that people to follow and to collaborate with. So yeah, team, tam, traction, and Skillshare they had a bunch of users. They had done it in a very what we call capital efficient way, so they hadn't spent a lot of money getting these users on
Mm-hmm.
board.
Yeah.
And there are people like who are creators, and it's hard to make a living as a creator at a certain scale, right? Unless you're like getting really
Hmm.
super scaling. But a lot of these people, they're great creators, are so talented, but then they're able to make a living by teaching, and they just throw up some courses on their craft.
Yeah.
And so that
Mm,
was something magical there that was empowering this whole thing. So yeah, team tam traction. That's kind of what we look for in Skillshare.